There's a reason why poor people gather in groups to complain and rich people gather in groups to plan. There's a reason why unsuccessful people bond over their struggles and successful people bond over their strategies. There's a reason why mediocre people seek sympathy and exceptional people seek solutions. If you want to know why you're not where you want to be in life, record yourself for 1 week and count how many times you talk about your problems versus how many times you talk about your plans. The ratio will shock you, and it will explain everything about your current circumstances. The uncomfortable truth is that you've been trained to be a professional victim, and every time you share your sob story with someone, you're reinforcing your identity as someone who has problems instead of someone who solves problems. There was a man who owned nothing but a broken bicycle and a dream that seemed impossible to everyone around him. While his neighbors gathered every evening to share their complaints about the economy, about their bosses, about their circumstances, this man did something different. He went home, locked his door, and worked on his plan in complete silence. 5 years later, he owned the largest transportation company in his city. The same neighbors who had gathered to complain were now asking him for jobs. The difference wasn't luck, wasn't education, wasn't even talent. The difference was that he understood a fundamental truth that most people never learn. Your problems lose their power the moment you start broadcasting them to the world. You see, there's something that happens inside your mind when you constantly talk about your problems. Your brain begins to believe that talking about the problem is the same as solving the problem. It tricks you into thinking you're being productive when you're actually being destructive. Every time you tell someone about your struggle, your mind releases a little pressure, like opening a valve on a pressure cooker. That pressure is exactly what you need to force yourself into action, to push through the discomfort, to find the solution. But when you keep releasing that pressure through constant talking, you never build up enough force to break through to your breakthrough. I want to tell you about Maria, a farmer in a small village who faced the worst drought in 50 years. While every other farmer in the village spent their days at the local cafe, complaining about the weather, blaming the government, sharing their fears about losing their crops, Maria was different. She never joined those conversations. Instead, she studied water conservation techniques, learned about drought-resistant crops, and quietly implemented new farming methods. When the rains finally came the next season, every other farmer had lost their farms to death and despair. Maria's farm not only survived, but produced the best harvest the village had ever seen. The other farmers asked her how she did it. Her answer was simple. While you were talking about the problem, I was working on the solution. This is not just a nice story. This is a scientific reality. When you verbalize your problems repeatedly, you activate the same neural pathways in your brain that process the actual experience of those problems. Your mind cannot tell the difference between experiencing a problem and talking about experiencing a problem. So every time you tell someone about your struggle, you're literally making your brain relive that struggle. But there's something even more dangerous about sharing your problems with everyone who will listen. You begin to identify yourself as someone who has problems instead of someone who solves problems. Your reputation shifts from being known as a person of action to being known as a person of complaints. People start to see you coming and they already know what kind of conversation they're about to have. They begin to avoid you not because they don't care about you, but because your energy has become toxic. Your problems have become your identity. The most successful people I have ever studied have one thing in common. They have a completely different relationship with their challenges. They don't deny that problems exist. They don't pretend everything is perfect, but they understand that problems are like seeds. They grow when you give them attention, water, and fertile ground when you constantly talk about your problems. You're watering them, giving them attention, providing them with the perfect environment to grow bigger and stronger in your life. Think about the people in your life who seem to always have drama, always have something wrong, always have a crisis. Have you noticed that their problems never seem to get smaller? Have you noticed that solving one problem just leads to another problem? This isn't coincidence. This is the natural result of a mind that has been trained to focus on problems instead of solutions. When your primary conversation topic is what's wrong in your life, your brain becomes expert at finding what's wrong. It becomes weak at finding what's right, what's possible. There was a young man who started a business with nothing but a borrowed computer and an idea. For the first 6 months, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. His website crashed. His suppliers let him down. His first employees quit. His family thought he was wasting his time. But instead of calling his friends every day to complain, instead of posting on social media about his struggles, instead of seeking sympathy from everyone around him, he did something powerful. He created a rule for himself. He could only talk about his problems with one person, and only for 15 minutes per week. The rest of the time, he had to focus his mental energy on finding solutions. What happened next was remarkable. Without the constant emotional release of complaining, his mind was forced to stay under pressure. That pressure created urgency. That urgency created creativity. That creativity created solutions. Within 2 years, his business was generating more money per month than most people make in a year. When people asked him how he overcame all those early challenges, he told them, I stopped talking about them and started solving them. Your problems are not your enemy. Your problems are your training ground. They are preparing you for the level of success you are meant to achieve, but only if you treat them correctly. When you broadcast your problems to the world, you're asking the world to help you carry them. When you ask people to help you carry your problems, you never develop the strength to carry them yourself. You never develop the muscle that comes from overcoming challenges alone. You never discover what you're truly capable of when you're forced to rely on your own resources, your own creativity, your own determination. This doesn't mean you should never seek advice. This doesn't mean you should never ask for help. There's a massive difference between strategically seeking wisdom from someone who has already solved the problem you're facing and emotionally dumping your struggles on anyone who will listen. When you seek advice, you're looking for solutions. When you complain about your problems, you're looking for sympathy. Solutions move you forward. Sympathy keeps you stuck. Here's what I want you to understand. Every successful person you admire has faced problems that were just as difficult as the ones you're facing right now. The difference is not that they had fewer problems. The difference is how they processed those problems. They processed them internally first. They worked through the emotional impact privately. They explored potential solutions quietly. They built their strength in silence. Only after they had done the internal work did they strategically seek input from people who could actually help them move forward. There's a woman I know who was raising 3 children alone after her husband abandoned the family. She was working 2 jobs, struggling to pay rent, dealing with one crisis after another, but she made a decision that changed everything. She stopped talking about her problems with her friends, her family, her co-workers. Instead, she started talking about her plans. Instead of sharing what was wrong, she started sharing what she was going to make right. Instead of asking for sympathy, she started asking for opportunity. The transformation was incredible. People started to see her differently. Instead of someone to pity, they saw someone to respect. Instead of someone who needed help, they saw someone who could help others. Opportunities started coming her way because people wanted to be around her energy, not drain from it. Within 3 years, she had started her own business, bought her own home, and become the kind of person that other single mothers came to for advice and inspiration. The shift happened not because her problems disappeared, but because she changed her relationship with her problems. She stopped feeding them with her words and started starving them with her silence. She stopped giving them power through constant attention and started giving power to her solutions through focused action. When you keep your problems to yourself, something powerful happens in your mind. You become forced to find solutions because you don't have the emotional release valve of constant complaining. Your brain, unable to get relief through talking, starts looking for relief through problem solving. This is when your creativity kicks in. This is when your resourcefulness emerges. This is when you discover capabilities you never knew you had. But there's another level to this principle that most people never consider. When you stop talking about your problems, you also stop attracting more problems. You see, like attracts like. When your conversation is focused on what's wrong, you tend to notice more things that are wrong. You tend to attract people who also focus on what's wrong. Your entire environment becomes problem-hunted. I want you to think about the most positive, successful person you know. Have you ever noticed that they seem to have fewer problems than everyone else? It's not that they actually have fewer problems. It's that they have trained their mind to focus on solutions instead of problems, opportunities instead of obstacles, possibilities instead of limitations. This focus becomes their reality. There's a principle that governs this. What you focus on expands. If you constantly talk about your financial problems, your mind becomes expert at finding evidence of financial problems. If you constantly talk about relationship problems, your mind becomes expert at finding evidence of relationship problems. But if you train your mind to focus on solutions, opportunities, and possibilities, that's what expands in your experience. The man who built that transportation empire I told you about at the beginning understood this principle. While his neighbors were expanding their problems through constant discussion, he was expanding his solutions through constant action. While they were getting together to complain about the economy, he was studying the economy to find opportunities. While they were talking about what they couldn't do, he was quietly doing what they said couldn't be done. This is the difference between people who break through and people who break down. People who break through process their problems internally until they find solutions. People who break down process their problems externally until they find sympathy. One approach builds strength. The other approach builds dependence. I'm not telling you to suffer in silence. I'm not telling you to pretend problems don't exist. I'm telling you to change your approach to problems. Instead of seeking people to share your problems with, seek people who can share solutions with you. Instead of looking for someone to understand your struggle, look for someone who has overcome a similar struggle. Instead of wanting people to feel sorry for you, want people to learn from you how to overcome challenges. When you make this shift, everything changes. Your energy changes because you're no longer draining yourself with constant problem-focused conversations. Your reputation changes because people start to see you as someone who overcomes challenges instead of someone who is overcome by challenges. Your opportunities change because successful people are attracted to other people who handle difficulties with strength and grace. But let me tell you something even more powerful. When you stop being the person who tells everyone about your problems, you start becoming the person that others come to with their solutions. You become a magnet for wisdom, for opportunity, for connection with people who are moving forward instead of people who are stuck. The universe has a way of rewarding people who handle their challenges with dignity and strength. I knew a man who used to be known in his office as the complainer. Every Monday morning, he would tell everyone about his weekend problems. Every lunch break, he would share his latest crisis. Every conversation somehow became about his struggles. He wondered why he kept getting passed over for promotions, why people seemed to avoid him. why his career was stagnant. Then one day, he made a decision. He decided to become known for something different. For 6 months, he said nothing about his problems at work. When people asked how he was doing, he talked about what he was learning, what he was working on, what he was excited about. When challenges came up, he handled them quietly and shared only the solutions he had found. The transformation was remarkable. Within 1 year, he was promoted. Within 2 years, he was leading a team. Within 3 years, he was running a department. People started coming to him for advice because they saw him as someone who could handle pressure, someone who could find solutions, someone who could be trusted with bigger responsibility. This is what happens when you change your relationship with problems. You don't just solve your current problems faster, you position yourself to handle bigger problems, which means you position yourself for bigger opportunities. Companies don't promote people who complain about small problems to positions where they will face big problems. They promote people who solve small problems quietly. The same principle applies in every area of life. In relationships, people are attracted to partners who can handle life's challenges with maturity and strength, not partners who need constant emotional support for every difficulty. In business, customers want to work with suppliers who solve problems without drama, not suppliers who make every challenge into a crisis. In leadership, people follow those who remain calm under pressure, not those who spread panic when things get difficult. Here's a 30-day challenge I want to give you. For the next 30 days, I want you to process every problem internally before you talk about it externally. When something goes wrong, instead of immediately calling someone to complain, sit with the problem. Think about it. Work through your emotions about it. Explore possible solutions. Only after you have done this internal work should you consider seeking external input. And when you do seek external input, seek it from someone who can actually help you solve the problem, not just someone who will agree with you that the problem is terrible. You will be amazed at what happens. You will discover that many problems that seemed overwhelming when you are ready to broadcast them to the world become manageable when you process them quietly. You will find that your mind, when forced to work without the pressure release of complaining, becomes incredibly creative at finding solutions. You will notice that people start to respond to you differently because your energy has shifted from problem hunted to solution fund. But here's what will surprise you most. You will discover that you actually have fewer problems than you thought you had. Many of the things you used to call problems were actually just temporary inconveniences that became problems because you gave them the power of your words, your attention, your emotional energy. When you stop feeding these small difficulties with constant discussion, they lose their power to disturb your peace and disrupt your progress. The farmer Maria that I told you about earlier didn't just save her farm through this principle. She discovered something about herself that she never would have discovered if she had spent her time complaining with the other farmers. She discovered that she was a natural problem solver, an innovator, a leader. These qualities were always inside her, but they only emerged when she was forced to rely on them instead of relying on the sympathy and agreement of others. Your problems are not trying to destroy you. Your problems are trying to develop you. But they can only develop you if you relate to them correctly. When you broadcast your problems to the world, you're asking the world to help you avoid the development that those problems are designed to provide. When you keep your problems to yourself and work through them internally, you allow those problems to build the strength, wisdom, and character that will serve you for the rest of your life. The choice is yours. You can continue to be someone who shares problems and seeks sympathy, or you can become someone who solves problems and shares solutions. You can continue to be someone who talks about what's wrong, or you can become someone who demonstrates what's right. You can continue to drain people with your struggles, or you can inspire people with your strength. The man with the broken bicycle didn't become successful because he had fewer problems than his neighbors. He became successful because he had a better relationship with his problems. He understood that problems talked about become problems multiplied, but problems worked through become wisdom gained. He knew that every moment spent complaining was a moment not spent creating. He realized that his future success depended not on having fewer problems, but on becoming the kind of person who could solve any problem without needing the world to know about it first. Let me share with you one more story that will change how you see this forever. There was a woman who lost her job, her home, and her savings all in the same month. Everything that could go wrong in her life went wrong at once. She had every reason to call everyone she knew, to post on social media, to seek sympathy from anyone who would listen. Instead, she did something extraordinary. She took a piece of paper and wrote down every single problem she was facing. Then she wrote down one potential solution for each problem. She didn't share this list with anyone. She didn't ask for advice. She didn't seek sympathy. She just started working through her list, one solution at a time. 6 months later, she had not only solved every problem on that list, but she had built a life that was better than the one she had lost. She had started her own business, found a better place to live, and discovered strength she never knew she possessed. When people asked her how she overcame such overwhelming challenges, she said something profound. I realized that my problems were not my story. My solutions were my story. And I wanted to write a story worth reading. This is the truth that will set you free. Your problems are not your identity. Your problems are not your story. Your problems are not your destiny. Your problems are simply the raw material from which you build your strength, your wisdom, your character, and your success. But only if you treat them correctly, only if you process them internally instead of broadcasting them externally. Only if you focus on solutions instead of symptoms. Right now, in this moment, you have a choice to make. You can continue living as someone who shares problems and seeks sympathy, or you can choose to become someone who solves problems and shares wisdom. You can continue being someone who talks about what's wrong with your life, or you can become someone who demonstrates what's possible in life. You can continue draining people's energy with your struggles, or you can inspire people with your strength. The transformation begins the moment you make this decision. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when your problems get smaller, right now. The moment you decide that your problems will no longer define you, that your complaints will no longer control you, that your challenges will no longer defeat you, the moment you decide that you are bigger than any problem you will ever face and that you don't need the world's permission or sympathy to prove it. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think about the biggest problem you're facing today, the one that's been keeping you awake at night, the one you've been talking about to anyone who will listen. I want you to make a commitment that for the next 7 days, you will not mention this problem to another human being. Instead, you will spend that same energy working on solutions. You will research, you will plan, you will take action, you will build your strength in silence. At the end of those 7 days, you will have learned something powerful about yourself. You will have learned that you are more capable than you thought. You are more creative than you realized. You are stronger than you believed. And you will understand why successful people handle their challenges differently than unsuccessful people. It's not because they have fewer problems. This is your moment. This is your opportunity to make the shift that will change everything. Stop telling people your problems and start showing people your solutions. Stop asking for sympathy and start building strength. Stop expanding your difficulties through conversation and start expanding your capabilities through focused action. Your breakthrough is waiting on the other side of this decision. The only question is, are you ready to make it? The choice is yours, but the time is now. Your future self is waiting to meet the person you become when you stop talking about your problems and start solving them. Don't keep your future waiting any longer.